On this week's show, we have Dalager and Suzanne Sease. Between them, they have a long history of working as art buyers, producers, and photographic mentors. They join us today from across the pond, along with a pet cockatiel. So make yourself a cup of tea, sit back, and enjoy. Silent mouse click.
Yeah, but then a car just went past. So, it's going to be one or the other, isn't it?
Yeah.
How are you?
Not too bad. Not too bad.
I'm fine. Thanks for asking.
I was getting there. Sorry, slow off the mark. Friday afternoon, you know, it's time. It's almost time to clock off. But instead, we're here, you know,
slaving away for the. That's it. Slaving away for the listeners.
You put it more politely than me.
I hope you all appreciate it.
Yeah, I've been. You know, one of those weeks where you have like, I don't think the weather's been great this week, and I don't think that's always a difficult one. When you have a few good days of weather and you just want to be outside, and then you have a few miserable days of weather and it kind of really gets you down because you're just like, ugh. I think this side of this this third lockdown has been a bit difficult, partly because January, February, March time. It's never. I don't know. March isn't too bad, but January, February, they are crap months.
They are. I would say they're the worst months.
Unless you're Scottish and you know you've got Burns nights to look forward to.
That's true.
At the end of January, you know, like you've got a good kind of knees up to look forward to. I just think there's just nothing much going on in January, February. They're just like
they do
overrated. Yeah.
So now we're in March. Well, we're almost. Well, now by the time this goes out, we're in April.
Well, yeah. Well,
sorry for the illusion. We're in April.
Well, I'm trying to be, you know, because I think that's what my point was with those months, and I've been chatting to a few colleagues of mine and who've been slightly demotivated, as they always are at the beginning of the year. You know, that kind of rut that you get into, and I've been trying to practice a bit of Kaizen, which have you heard of before? It's like they always say that Fujifilm are big into their Kaizen.
Now, is this the improvements via upgrades?
No, but I love your technical spin on it. It's the idea of I mean, it's not far off. It is improvements, but it's like a 1% improvement each day.
Okay.
You got your tech head on. Is this improvements via upgrades? Cannot compute. No,
I do sound like that.
It basically was born out of post-World War II industrialization and car manufacturing, I think. I once listened to a whole podcast on it. It's basically the idea that you incrementally improve the quality of something, but you do so by 1%, and rather than trying to make massive technological leaps and stuff like that, you actually just slowly kind of work on something to just make it a tiny little bit better every day. And therefore it makes me feel better when I have days when I don't get through my massive to-do list, because I'm like, well, if I ticked off 1%, then I'm still doing okay.
Well, do you know the origin of Kaizen?
No, but I'm guessing you're going to tell me because I heard you tapping away.
Well, I definitely haven't Googled this, but it was formed by two kanji. Now, Kai obviously means change, and Zen obviously means good. So it means literally change good. Thank you very much to giuseppefoti.co.uk for that definition.
It is a good thing to live by, I think, because it kind of makes stuff a bit more manageable. Especially when, you know, we've talked before on the show, the idea of kind of imposter syndrome and the kind of the highs and lows of a career in, you know, in something creative, in the creative industries, and those kind of days when you just get frustrated because the software isn't working, or your computer spent all day crashing, or literally that's all you've done all day is non-creative tasks, which, let's face it, make up a lot of what we have to spend our time doing, rather than taking pictures.
Not me. All of my tasks are creative, Greg.
Are they?
Oh, yeah. Even my monotonous ones, because I create systems. And then I kind of feel like I have been a little bit more creative, because then the computer does the work. It's all part of my my operation simplification.
Yes. Which, wait a minute, that seems to have got less grand I thought it was a grand simplification. It's now gone to operation simplification.
I had to simplify it because it turns out I actually bought some more equipment. So
you've had to simplify your grand simplification because it was getting.
I think it started off as the great simplification, didn't it?
Oh yeah, that was
because I had a little book of it, and then it turns out
red book.
Yeah, the great simplification was fantastic until I needed to lift a case, and then it turned into the back-breaking simplification because I'd put. So you had
to have another revolution. Dispose the leadership of the great simplification.
They're gone.
You had a couple of show trials.
Yeah. Now we're on to operation simplification. Because
it sounds quite militaristic and quite
I am now being very militaristic about it because I am now absolutely hell-bent on not buying any more equipment. So yesterday I bought 2 new stand bags.
Sounds like you need another coup.
Well, do you know what though? I don't know if you have this, but like all of the hardware that we carry around is wildly heavy. And I just thought that trying to condense everything down into as few bags as possible was a really sensible idea, which when you say it like that, sounds like a good idea. And then obviously the bag that I had found that fits all my kit weighs 40-something kilos.
Blimey.
Can't bloody carry it. I tried to lift it into the back of my car and I went, that's my back.
Yeah.
So I've now split it into 2 circular bags.
See, when I was doing, lots and lots of kind of newspaper work and kind of editorial photography for newspapers, quite often you'd be running around town. Sometimes you might have more than one job a day in terms of kind of portrait work or something like that. But I managed to get everything down to kind of a stand bag, a lighting bag, and a camera bag. And the camera bag would be on my back, lighting bag would be rolling, and the stand bag I'd sling over a shoulder. But I find it really hard to kind of work like that now. And it's a shame because I think the more you simplify your kit, actually the easier it is to be, or the more you're forced to be creative when shooting. Because ultimately, the more lights you have set up, and this is why I have always been somebody who's resisted to kind of shooting on a tripod and shooting tethered and all of these things, which make sense when you're doing commercial work. But at the same time, I find it can massively limit the way that you can respond to a situation, because the more stuff that you have set up, the slower everything becomes to change. You can't just, and the more that you spend trying to work out like why that bit of isn't being lit the way you want it to be, the less time you're actually thinking bigger picture on a creative bent. I find it interesting that balance between kind of creating something that's beautifully lit and thoughtfully lit, and involves quite complicated lighting setups, balanced with variety and actually getting something totally different that you weren't expecting to get. I think that there's there's like an inverse proportion.
Well, like the more time you spend on the technical side of things, the less time you're spending on the actual creative.
Yeah, I think so. I think
I'd agree.
Kind of carried away into that, and you end up kind of getting tunnel vision on something, and then that becomes harder to actually create something that feels kind of dynamic. And obviously everyone has different lighting styles, and their work looks different, and some people that's absolutely fine, but I've always found that that's a difficult thing to balance with my style of shooting.
At the same time, playing devil's advocate here, as you get better and know your kit more and more, moving stuff around and knowing exactly how to set things up does take less time.
It does. I just feel like the more, like, in terms of sometimes on shoots, you've got limited time to get multiple setups, and if something's not kind of working the way you want it to work, and you've got a lot of lights set up and stands set up. I was on a shoot last week, and it was in somebody's house, and we were shooting, in 2 different rooms. But even trying to get up, the stairs with all of your lighting kit, C-stands, had an aperture light on the go, so you were plugging in, finding extension cords, all that kind of stuff, just eats into your time. And when you've got somebody who's sat around kind of, and you're in their house, it suddenly, and there's certain shots that you think, well, actually, the natural light here is good enough, and I'm going to light it, and I know that somebody who really knows their lighting is going to look at it and appreciate that it's been lit. but a lot of people wouldn't even know. You know, they'd look at it and go. So it's always that thing of like, you can really push and push and push with the technical side and bring in lots of kit, and sometimes you could have got the same thing if you just kind of thought slightly outside the box and compromised a tiny little bit here or there.
Now, I am going to play devil's advocate again. Seems to be my thing this week. But say, for example, if you are going to be shooting like that with less kit, and for example like that, you're putting yourself as a photographer into a bracket with more people. Like, there'll be more people who shoot with natural light than, for example, shoot my style of work.
Yeah.
But then again, I guess the market's bigger, because people would probably want more natural stuff than my kind of like my slightly darker stuff.
Yeah, and I think, you know, when you're shooting commercial, you've got to be shooting with all of that stuff anyway. You know, and you have to know how to use it. So it's important to know that. I sometimes think with the editorial world, like there are people that get away with not really lighting that much, or not really having to light that much, and maybe that makes them more flexible and makes them. I think if you limit yourself in any capacity, in any creative capacity, if you go to a shoot and you've only got one lens, you know, not that I do this, but if for some reason you broke a lens or something happened, and you had one lens to work with, you are going to be forced to think very differently creatively than if you turn up and you've got 4 lenses to choose from. And it's the same with lighting, you know. If you've got 5 lights in your bag, you're going to be like, well, we could just throw an extra light in. We could just throw another one up there. We could throw it. Whereas if you've got one light in your bag, it makes you think differently about the way you shoot. And I think it's always an interesting thing to try and challenge yourself creatively when the opportunity arises, and it's acceptable to do so, if you see what I mean, as long as you're not kind of compromising anything for a client.
No, I completely agree. And it's with that in mind, actually, that I bought this. Hang on.
For the viewers back home, Tom has
vanished. I'm back.
Climbed a ladder to the top of his very tall shelf. Now, and pulled down a tiny black box with buttons on it.
It is a Bluetooth remote for my Sony cameras. Now, I had a shoot last week, and I thought I would try something that I'd never done before. I had the camera on a tripod, and I knew my framing. I knew exactly what I was going for. And I had this. And so I was controlling the autofocus via this and firing the camera and just chatting to the subject. Completely took the camera out of the equation and was just completely chatting, triggering it on my right hand. And I had a lovely time. Got some really natural stuff. And it was really nice. Would I do that on every shoot? No. But, you know, like you say, it's horses for courses, really.
Yeah, and I think sometimes when you do that with a portrait shoot, it is quite interesting in that sense that you are not you're not separated from the viewer by looking through the viewfinder, which is why it's the same when if I take pictures on my Rolleiflex, you know, it's a twin lens reflex, so you look down into the prism, and then so you can look up and get a direct line of sight with the subject. Yeah, they're actually looking at a camera that's held waist level. You get a totally different type of portrait from something like that, because it's not like you're pointing aggressively this thing into their face. Yeah, which is maybe why like Hasselblads, you know, have been historically popular with portrait photographers.
No, absolutely. It's actually one of the reasons I've slimmed down. In part of the great simplification, I actually took all the battery grips off my cameras, and I've just shrunk everything down as small as I can get it. Because I'm a big bloke. If I then have a big camera, I mean, I use Sony, so they're not very big in general, but like, you know, you want to take every kind of barrier. I've personally wanted to take every kind of barrier away from it to try and create more pure reactions or pure work. And I feel that actually making the camera smaller has actually had a bit of an effect. Yeah.
The psychology, there'd be an interesting thing to do an episode on maybe with a portrait photographer in the future, is actually the huge part that psychology plays in portrait photography.
Oh yeah. Do you know what would be interesting? It'd be interesting to get a model on, and I'd love to know how it is, you know, being photographed full time on the other side.
Yeah.
But maybe that's a conversation that we should have off air.
Yes. Let's not plan on air.
No.
What else have you been up to this week? Have you been enjoying...
Couple of shoots. The Great Simplification, or the Operation Simplification, has been carrying on. The new kit bags have been ordered. Everything else is just, I'm feeling, I've got myself out of my funk.
Okay.
So I'm feeling super positive now about everything, which is great. I basically had decided, I had for the past year, I'm sure that there are some of the listeners who might relate. For the past year or so, I've been kind of going, oh my God, where do I want to take my work? What do I want to do? How do I fit in? What are the trends? Blah, blah, blah. And actually, I'm all right. Sounds terrible, but I'm like, I'm just going to do me. And it turns out, after my thought process is so clear now, because I'm just like, I don't want to be like everyone else. I don't want to follow the trends. I don't care about being a cool photographer. I just want to create work that I really like and I can be proud about, like I used to. A couple of years ago, I was really proud to show my portfolio off, and then I think I was trying to, please too many people, and then I wasn't really proud about showing it off. Now I'm just going to go back to shooting whatever I want to shoot and be really proud about it. That is going to be my artist's voice. Like if that's not a massively commercial voice, then that'll be a shame. but I feel that as an artist, because I very rarely refer to myself as an artist, but over the past couple of months I have kind of come to terms with it. Your voice is unique to you. It's got to be genuine as well. There's so many people who are shooting everything that kind of is just done to trend, and it's not genuine. You can see right through it. And actually, I want my stuff to be 100% me, genuine, and then I'll be really proud to stand behind it in meetings. Yeah. And I think with that pride will come jobs. So yeah, my week's been great.
Have you been... one thing I've been spending my time on this week is doing super enhance on some old work. Have you seen this feature?
I have. Do you know what? It's kind of amazing. Now, do you want to explain it for anyone who's missed it?
Well, it's basically a new tool in Photoshop they brought out, which is called Super Resolution. But I just love the fact that to actually get it going, you have to click a button that says enhance. And
it is very much like the spy
me of all
films.
Those terrible films where they just inexplicably enhance grainy footage and get like a clear picture of someone.
Can you zoom in on that? Quick, enhance. Yeah, no, it is exactly like that. But the feature is pretty magical. Yeah, like it's really. We were actually doing some tests on it before we came on air, and it's really, really impressive.
Yeah, I mean, I've got some old pictures that. I won't go into it in too much detail here, but
I was going to say, Greg, have you ever had a situation maybe that you've maybe had some negatives destroyed or anything like that?
Yeah, it rings a bell. Yeah, let me think.
Doesn't it? Did it lab?
Oh yeah, there was that time that the lab binned my negatives. Yeah,
and they didn't get in touch with you.
Yeah, bit of a sore point.
Sorry, I'm sorry to bring it up, but on a plus note, Photoshop now can help.
Yeah, so I've basically got pictures which are wide lux. Wide lux is a camera I use, a film swing lens, Japanese swing lens camera, and I've unfortunately, through unfortunate circumstances, got only low res scans which were sent by the lab before they decided to bin the negs. And yeah, I was interested because the pictures are from a story a few years ago, a tribe I was spending time with in Tanzania, and I'm pretty certain that there's not that many people that have got images that are wide lux of that remote location.
Come on, calm down. We're always going out to photograph tribes on wide luxes. All the listeners do.
So it's frustrating not to have the image. I can see the images I've got, but it's frustrating not to have them in any kind of usable format that I can ever print. And so this feature is quite interesting because it does. I mean, it's early days. This particular one, it doubles the size of an image, which is pretty impressive. Through AI, and it does make me think. What is in the future? What in 10 years' time? What will they be able to do? on the flip side of that, I guess, is the concern that ultimately, if you've got low res images online, because you're holding on to the high res to license or whatever, and someone gets hold of a low res, then they might be able to use that software to effectively give them an image that they could use on a larger scale. I mean, I'm not sure who would actually do that, but
at the same time, I'll ring up my lawyers and be like, enhance, and then the lawyers will be like, right, I'm on it.
Well, so, I guess, yeah. I mean, I guess I've not really got round to using those kind of softwares, those reverse image searches, but I know there's plenty of them out there that are emerging. Like even Google image search is pretty good if you put one of your images in and see where it matches them with being used across the web.
Yep.
But yeah, so it's an interesting. We'll watch this space. I'll see what kind of what developments come from that, because
it kind of has blown my mind. So I have a social media folder with images that are ready to go on socials and stuff, and I did a test before, and it took a 1.2 megapixel image up to 5 megapixels in 4 seconds, I think it took, and the image compared to the original is, I mean, it's so imperceptible, the difference between the original and the upscaled one. It's really impressive.
What it means, I mean, I've got like pictures in my archive from going back to kind of 2006, whatever, and there's plenty of listeners will have stuff going back even further. And obviously, digital cameras back then, much smaller sensors, but you're taking pictures which you're still proud of, but they're not, massive files. It's going to be interesting to see whether or not this could actually allow people to dig back into their archives a bit. And also, I guess things like drone photography, drones don't have the biggest sensors. I know that in the past I've used Mavic Pros, and you've given them to a client, they want to run it as a DPS in a magazine, and you're kind of like, yep, it will work, but I'm going to be able to spot that it's been enlarged and not quite got the resolution there, whereas now you could effectively double that image size.
Does it work on RAW files?
It works on RAW files, JPEGs, anything.
So you can double the size of the RAW file.
Yeah.
Wow. And then what's to stop you doubling that again?
Don't know, mate. Quantum physics.
I smell some testing coming up.
Yeah, that sounds like a black hole of doom.
Because here's the thing, right? This is interesting on so many levels for us as photographers, but also the photography industry in general. Why am I going to buy a 100 megapixel camera when I can buy a 50 and then just enhance it?
Yeah, I'm going to sell all my old really low res digital cameras and say that they're double what they actually are, but then put in the small print, if used with Photoshop enhanced.
You're chucking a free month of Adobe Photoshop. But it is a really impressive, it's a really cool feature. Like it's it works really well.
Yeah, no, I'd be interested to see, interested to actually test it out with printing.
Yes, I mean that really is the kind of key thing there.
Yeah. Shall we dip into this week's episode?
Sorry, I'm very tired. I've been up since 3. So yes, I think we should. Who do we have on?
It's actually 5 o'clock now, mate. You've been up 2 hours.
Yeah, imagine. No, unfortunately, feels like I've been up 25 hours. But yeah, I was got up yesterday afternoon at 3 o'clock. But yeah, so let's get into it, because we have got some wonderful guests all the way from America.
This week on the show, we are very happy to be joined by Suzanne Sease and Kat Dalager. Suzanne is a photographer's mentor now these days, but a history as an art buyer. And Kat Dalager has a history as an art buyer as well. And between them, we worked this out, wait for it, 80 years of experience in the industry. So
it's pretty decent.
Pretty bonkers episode you're about to listen to, and definitely going to be well worth a listen, because these two ladies have seen it and been there and done it. So welcome to the show, guys.
Thank you.
We'd love to get a little bit of a brief background on because me just saying art buyer doesn't know justice. Explain a little bit about your background and your career paths, if possible.
Well, I started in advertising, did lots of internships, agencies all over. Got out of college, worked up in Baltimore in an advertising agency, then came back to Richmond, started at the Martin Agency, was there for, too long, and then I decided to be a freelance art producer as well as a creative consultant to photographers. And having been in the business in all different levels of accounts, from small accounts to global accounts, I've seen everything that photographers, have shot, and get a good gauge on what the art directors are really going to be looking for.
And just very quickly, you're coming to us from whereabouts in the States today?
I'm coming to you from Richmond, Virginia.
Okay, thank you, Suzanne. Kat, would you like to give us a little background on yourself?
Absolutely. First of all, thanks for having me, and thanks for everyone for joining on this. I started in Minneapolis, and I went to art school, so I started in that at a young age. Then I became an artist representative, so I saw the world from that perspective, illustration and photographer, and then I became I was a photo studio manager in between. Then I was an art buyer / art producer. Then I kept migrating into different roles at agencies, and both in-house and external agencies, as in production, in project management, operations. But along the way, I've always been an advocate for photographers. I'm a huge believer that if you keep the industry strong, you have to start with all facets of the industry. Mm-hmm. It should never be an us versus them. It should be always an us. And currently I'm on the board of directors at the ASMP in Minneapolis, and I remain committed to, again, keeping the industry strong.
Fantastic. And obviously, you've seen a huge amount of changes in the industry, having been, working for that amount of time. You've seen the film digital transition as that's kind of changed, and you've seen the birth of social media and everything in between. So this should be a good show, I think.
We hope. And things, again, exponentially changed in this past year.
Yeah, absolutely.
Why? What happened?
Yeah, a couple of things, especially coming from Minneapolis.
So I
Even
guess
more so.
That's a good place for us to start, really. I mean, we've spoken to a lot of photographers, who've written into the show and who are colleagues and peers of ours. And there is a lot of people at the moment who are struggling a little bit with this prolonged lockdown, even though there is light at the end of the tunnel. There's been an uptick in mental health issues, and people, I guess, really getting better grip of how they're feeling about things, and realizing that they are perhaps feeling a lack of motivation, slight hopelessness. Lots of their clients have disappeared, work's kind of gone very quiet. I guess that's a good place to start. What ideas do you guys have that might be able to help some of our listeners with motivation, to help to re-engage, when things open up, and kind of finding new energy, I guess?
Well, I think that this is a great time for photographers to be really looking at their work and maybe reinventing themselves. Take this time to really explore all that's out there. I mean, there's so much that's out there with, Ads of the World, reading Ad Age, Ad Week, going to Archive, looking at the One Show, just going to all these different portals that are out there with photographers' portfolios. See who your competition is, and be honest on who your competition is, and use this time to just really be who you are as an artist. Get out and shoot, and get out and do great personal projects. I wouldn't do them as COVID projects, but I would do a great personal project that really could be meaningful. And Kat and I were talking before, and I'm going to let her continue on this thread that we were discussing earlier.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that is spend time with positivity. Maybe creating that community that lifts you up rather than brings you down. It's one thing to complain about something, and everybody needs to vent, but if you spend a lot of time in that negativity, you're going to stay in that negative space. So positivity breeds positivity. Spend time with positive things. Think about things you can do to help others. I'm going to give you a success story. I got an email promotion the other day, just must have been yesterday or the day before, from a photographer named Reed Rolls in the US. He had done a passion project of portraits during quarantine, and this was something that he wanted to do for himself. Lo and behold, that was last March. In February, he got a call from American Express, the agency that works on American Express, turned that into a project. So he actually got a job out of that personal project. And again, it was something that was not just COVID-based, but it came out of quarantine. And it was something that had legs for forever, right? It wasn't just something that was one and done. So there are ways of taking, again, things that are your passion projects and turning them into something that could be profitable. I also judged a photo show recently, and the photographer had done a Bubble Boy series, and he actually was the Bubble Boy, and a whole series. And now he won that competition. He won Best of Show. So he's able to take that now and use that as a promotion. He has the kudos to go with that. And again, that's something that can enhance his career along the way.
For me mainly, what's a Bubble Boy?
It is, he had taken an inflatable vinyl bubble.
Okay.
And literally, it's a human goes inside, and he put himself in a variety of different situations. But it was
I would not
obviously
have got that.
The metaphor of being isolated in the bubble. So he was the subject in each of them, and he would dress up like, say, he was in a lawn chair in a Hawaiian shirt sitting in the middle of his yard in the bubble, or he would be, trying to going for a walk with the other subject was his wife, and as if they're holding hands, but obviously there's the bubble barrier in between.
Oh, wow.
So living life in the bubble. Hilarious, really well done, very well produced, and just a fun thing. He did it for himself, and again, I have no doubt he'll get some direct work out of that, because it's such a great concept, a great idea. Really
so I
fun.
guess, the first step, though, I think for a lot of photographers is probably going to be trying to get that remotivation by, as you said, by trying to find positive things to be focusing on and surrounding themselves with positivity. I think possibly a lot of photographers, one of the reasons we started the podcast in a way was to help build a bit of a community, because if you're not going to the lab, if you're not going to, events, industry events, a lot of photographers are going to spend this time in isolation from other photographers. Has there been any kind of online resources that you've seen? I know that some of the festivals are happening virtually, I guess, and portfolio reviews, etc.
There are a lot of portfolio reviews that are continuing to happen, and then also, sorry, that is my bird clock. I'm a bird lover.
That's brilliant.
I forgot about that. So there are many different portfolio reviews that are happening virtually. Things like Adobe Max, that used to be an in-person event, which would cost thousands of dollars, now totally free online. So there are ways you can enhance your Photoshop skills, for example, and online. So there's a lot of learning that can happen too, and that can be inspiring, something to add to your toolkit.
Excellent. And Suzanne, you mentioned kind of this was a good time for photographers to, discover who they are and to try and burrow down. I think that's something that some photographers struggle with in terms of getting to the kind of the nub of their work, and how photographers can really understand the essence of what their work is about and what makes it theirs, because it's sometimes very difficult to actually see that in your own work. You just kind of produce it and you're not necessarily aware of why you might be producing or themes or threads which carry on throughout. Have you got any tips on how they can get a better understanding of that? Any strategies or any questions that they can ask themselves that would help with that?
Well, I think it's hard for them to ask themselves, what their weaknesses and their strengths are sometimes, because they're just too personally close to it. And that's where I think an outside person comes in. I think that, just reaching out to a consultant, there's several out there. In the UK and in North America, there's plenty of us. But also make sure if what your goals are in the end game to sell your work, make sure that consultant has the experience in that industry. So if their whole background was editorial, they don't really understand the commercial world. So it's really important with that. And then also, art directors, they like to talk to photographers too. So maybe find an art director that you can talk to and really get some good advice from. And, just brainstorm with people. I mean, I think that sometimes when photographers are in just a club, a lot of times they don't really want to show their work to other photographers in the club. So sometimes it's maybe reaching out to, let's say you're just starting out, or you're in the middle level, reaching out to someone higher up that's really well known and ask them, how did they get where they are? Maybe talk to a rep and say, looking at my work, where do you think my strengths and weaknesses are, and what do you think I should be doing? So really talking to the people who have been in the industry, who are in the industry, who have their eyes about what's happening in the industry. It's really important to, reach out to people and get a second opinion.
And I've always talked about, what I call a pyramid. So imagine a pyramid, and in that pyramid you have different stratifications, right? So depending on who you want to market to, if at the bottom of the pyramid, it's very broad, right? So it's the broad part of the pyramid. The work, let's say at a local level, means you'd have to be pretty diverse and maybe not as deep. So for example, maybe you do portraiture, but you might do some interiors as well, and maybe you do a little bit of food. And that works very, very well at that local level because you have to be flexible. As you get into that middle stratification, you can be a little bit more refined. You're a little bit deeper in some areas, but you're maybe not as broad. So maybe you only do people, lifestyle, and food. And that works, let's say, I'm going to call it a regional level. That means those clients that are a little bit more specific, an agency that specializes in gas and oil, for example. Then when you get to that top of that pyramid, that's when you are a real specialist. And that's when often agencies or people who are buying art are looking for someone who does exactly one specific thing. I want someone who shoots motorcycles. And in your portfolio, that means you need to be very honed in. So you're not going to want to show food and motorcycles. You're going to want to show motorcycles, maybe some cars, but again, you can become very much more specific. So understanding who you're marketing to tells you what to include in your portfolio. Because if someone's at the very, very top and they're buying for a specific thing, and you show a very broad breadth of work, then you would be automatically excluded because they're looking for someone who's specializing. Conversely, if a client needs someone who can do a lot of things and you only show one thing, then you will be excluded as well. And Suzanne, you have...
I also think that somebody can shoot, different things as long as the different things have a branded look. And so that shows that they're very... You know what you're going to get from them. And, sometimes I always used to tell people this, and Kat can agree because we've seen this with art directors. You can always be pulled in if your style is really kind of out there, but nobody can really push you out. And so show your best work, because they can always rein you in and make it safer or more generic or whatever, but they can't make you have something that's spectacular. That has to be within you.
Right. So only your best work. And Greg, I think you had mentioned something about what's that thread, right? And a lot of that is, what is the thread that weaves through the work? Maybe it is color palette. Maybe it's subject matter. Maybe it's style. Maybe it's, again, the type of imagery that you show. What is it that the buyer can look at and go, oh, I understand what you're about. And I have this project, and that's how I can make the match, because our color palette is also very moody for this project. But if you don't have something where they can make a connection, it's just harder for them. The exception to that is if you have someone that you already have a relationship with, right? So if you've already had a relationship with them, then you have a tendency to be able to shoot more variety because they trust you. They know what you're capable of. And that's another thing to do during COVID, and during lockdowns and isolation, is don't forget about those existing relationships. That's how Reed Rolls got that other project. He stayed in touch with people. And it just happened to be, again, the right place at the right time.
I also think that people really need to write down all the people that they've worked with throughout their career. Check where those people are on LinkedIn. Don't assume that they're at the place that they were before. Even if you get a database, make sure you confirm that on LinkedIn as well, because databases, I'm not sure how accurate they are with so much change going on this past year. And, reach out to them. They hired you or had you estimate a job for a reason, because they liked your work. So obviously, they know who you are, and it's just so important to continue to build those relationships, because really right now, word of mouth is the greatest advertising that a photographer can have.
And to piggyback on that, we all know that the vast majority of people are not in their offices. That means they're at home, and being able to reach through mailers is not happening right now. So if you're planning on sending out 500 mailers and spending the time and energy on that type of marketing, you might want to pause on that, because basically it will sit in a pile in the mailroom. When the people get back to the office, they'll either just pop them in the circular file, or they may never even see them. They may be dumped beforehand.
That's it. It's going straight in the bin.
Exactly.
I don't think anyone's going to. Why would you? There'll be a stack.
A year's worth.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly. Why would you want to go through it?
Yeah.
So, fair enough.
There are ways, though, again, going back to people that you know, and if you already know them and you know they're working from home, it's a situation where you can ask. So if I were to send you a mailer, where would be the best place for me to send it? That leaves it up to them if they want to offer their home address or not. And at least that way, if you are doing it, just be a little bit more mindful of sending something out, maybe a little bit more specific. And that way you can get permission from them without it being like creepy, like you're stalking them at their house.
Also, if you're going to be doing email promos, make sure it's not tone deaf. I have a folder of emails that I had gotten, or e-promos I've gotten through this past year, and it was amazing how some were just so incredibly tone deaf, like there's no pandemic. And so you have to really, also make sure it's kind of uplifting. Don't kind of send a gloom and doom mailer. So really make sure you're careful about what you're emailing to people. It's really important.
I do think it's important, though, to be aware of the cultural issues and the climate that's out there. For example, we know social justice is a very important aspect of communication right now in advertising, representation in advertising. So it's representation not only in who's diverse behind the camera, but who's in front of the camera. So if you have only white middle-class men in your portfolio, then that shows you're a little bit out of touch, because again, you're not representing the population that's very important right now. And that, make sure you have people of color, make sure you have a variety of gender, age groups, make sure your work is as diverse as it can be for the subject matter that you're putting in there. There are, because a lot of buyers are very specifically looking for that.
At the same time, obviously, we've got to be careful about appropriating and just doing something because it's, it might be the current issue. But I, for example, don't feel like I'm going to go and photograph, try and set up a project on a certain issue because I want it in my book. Because that, from my point of view, I know a lot of the art buyers, they'll go, well, this isn't genuine. This has just been done because he's trying to cotton on to a trend or cotton on, and then that, I'm very aware of, I think, as we should be, being responsible about things like this and not kind of, these social justice issues that are going on are bigger than us just rushing out to shoot a project. So I do kind of feel that people do have to be careful about it.
Truly.
I think if you do something like that, it will look forced.
Yeah.
And it will look it just won't work.
Disingenuous. Yeah. And Suzanne and I were speaking earlier. There was a very well-known photographer, maybe 30 years ago, who had done a project that was featuring beautiful portraits of homeless people, but the production value of the book that was sent out must have cost tens of thousands of dollars, and so it seemed a little self-serving because it didn't serve the population that was being represented.
That's probably about as tone deaf as it can get, right?
Right.
And he's not in the business anymore.
Yeah, funny that. Well, he probably went bankrupt sending out really expensive mailers.
Oh, there were many more stories that went with that. And believe me,
that wasn't the worst.
Yes, exactly, was not.
So if I guess at the moment then we've got this kind of, I think we're trying to get together a bit of a battle plan for photographers to help them get back on their feet and to get back into the game post-pandemic. So already you're saying, make sure that they're shooting personal projects, make sure that the projects are relevant and have the correct tone, keep your marketing up because that's important, but be aware of where you're sending the stuff. And what other winning strategies or in fact major failures have you witnessed over the years? What do you think? Because obviously it's still relevant, I'm sure, even with the pandemic, the things that you will have seen that you feel work and the things that you've seen that definitely don't work, such as the example you've just given.
I think one of the biggest mistakes made are not knowing your audience and not doing your homework.
Mm-hmm.
So making sure that whatever you send out is relevant to the audience to whom you're sending it. There's nothing worse when getting a call as an art producer and someone says, I'd like to send you some work, so what would you like to see? Well, you haven't done any homework. You don't know. If you don't know what we do, then I'm sorry.
Sure.
I remember getting a phone call where it was a young man who had worked for another rep. I had called that rep for a project for Finlandia, and so this person had obviously stolen this other rep's database, calls me and says, "Hey, I'm out on my own now. You called such and such for Finlandia, so what other accounts do you have?" And I was like, really? I don't have time to go through our roster right now.
Wow.
One of the things I have my clients do is they're on an email list that I send out. I read the trades, I read Media Spy, and I read Ad Age. And what I do is I send them account wins. Like, let's see, Ogilvy just got the Pinard Ricard Tequila Mezcal assignment, and it's global. Mm-hmm. And so what I do is they also got the Zippo global account last month. And so I send them Ogilvy's LinkedIn page, and then I send them the agency's website page, and or links. And so, but I research all this stuff, and then I also research really interesting articles that show how people are, what they're looking for in the industry. What are the trends? There's a website called Agency Spotter. And you can do research on regions, amount of employees, what their specialty is, and it's free.
Wow.
I think there are a lot of free resources out there. So, for example, there are different resources that can tell you what's the email protocol for a company and even list for free some of the key contacts there. You can always pay more and get more names, etc. But it's a good time to work on your marketing plan and hone your list and assess your work again too. So for example, one thing I've seen a lot lately, and I don't know why, is a lot of lifestyle shooters or portrait shooters who are shooting very homogeneously. That means I shoot males between the age of 24 and 29 in a single person setting. It's like, again, just like being so specific on what they're shooting. It's like, that's the time to just take 5 steps back from your work and say, okay, how can you make it a little bit more interesting?
For want of a better word, just more interesting.
Do you think it's worth photographers reaching out to other photographers and just going, look, you fancy doing like a critique swap? You know, I'll take a look. So I did this a couple of weeks ago with a friend of mine. He said, look, do you fancy doing it? I was like, yeah, why not? Can't hurt. And we basically just said, look, the gloves are off. Every comment goes, because the more brutal it is, the more helpful it'll be, you know, without being rude, obviously, about the stuff. And we went back and forth about each other's websites, work, and it was really, really useful.
And that's why, building that trusted community is important, because you can draw upon that trusted community. So it's not going to be tearing you down. It's going to be helping you. And yet you need someone who is very objective and who will tell you the truth. So if you trust them and have a good relationship, then it's mutual. People's parents are not to be trusted. They'll only tell you good stuff. I mean, my mum told me that I should give photography a go, and I believed her. And here I am, 20 years into a photography career. Still doing it.
That's it.
One thing to keep in mind too when you're sending things out by email is, I've always been preaching this, is use the subject line wisely. If you were going to send an email, because again, now that's basically the main point of contact for people who are purchasing, you would want to make sure that whatever they see in the subject line is going to tell them what they should be looking for when they open that email, if they should even open the email. A lot of times people don't even open emails. They get a random email. So instead you would say, Tom Barnes, new lifestyle imagery or whatever it might be, or shoots for American Express. So at least it's something that intrigues the person to be able to open it.
Yeah, you have to engage their interest.
Sure. But also, I guess that also knows, if they go, Tom Barnes shoots for American Express, and they go, I don't have anything to do with American Express, or that's not relevant to me at all. I sell footwear. They can just get rid of it.
But it's that American Express, a large brand, trusted you with their marketing job.
Sure.
That they trusted you for their project. And so that gives you a lot of street cred. And that's why it's really important, if you have tear sheets. And if you can't get tear sheets, you can also honestly take an image that was shot for American Express or Budweiser and put their logo on the actual image, because it's hard to get tear sheets, because I don't think agencies really do them anymore, and it's hard to find it in a magazine or on the internet, but it's just really important to show. I see people do just the logos, and to me that really doesn't give you the total street cred of being able to see the actual image that you were hired for.
Yeah, there is a lot about the crowd creates a crowd. With that, I worked on Harley Davidson for many years, and Harley was not known for huge budgets. But what I could tell the photographers is that you won't make money, as much money on my shoot, but you will make a lot of money with the work that you can show, because there's the intrigue of motorcycles. Harley has its own brand, so photographers could use that for many years in their work and get other work from it.
We were like that with Wrangler. Wrangler did not have good budgets, but it won awards. The work won award after award after award, and so that photographer got that photo credit, and so that art director at another agency sees, oh wow, that photographer shot that and it won an award. I want to use them too.
And don't forget about submitting your work to award shows, because that again is how you get some recognition.
I'm glad you've brought that up. So we want to talk about Tone Deaf, and this is, I've won some awards, so I feel like I maybe can get away with saying this, because actually if I don't win any, because now I'm just about to slate loads of awards, it doesn't really bother me that much. But the amount of emails I've had, and bear in mind, I've been doing okay, right? Like throughout all of this, it's been quieter than normal, and I've very much been in the same boat as everyone else, but I've kind of, got my head down and been all right. There are, however, a lot of people who haven't been in such a lucky position, and they've really suffered. So to get constant emails about how, about all the awards that we need to enter as a photographer, from awards that don't even matter. There are some awards that are so crap that it's like, and I'm not going to use a location here because I'll get slated for it by the photographer who lives in X. But they're the honesty. It's boiled my it's the amount of emails that I've had going, you need to enter this award, and I go, yeah, but I don't know if you guys have ever had this. The one that's got me is the personalised ones. So it's not just like a, hi Tom, you should enter this. Hi Tom, we noticed you won a couple of years ago, and we've looked at your website, and we reckon you should enter this. And you go, oh, wow. That's like, I don't know.
That's stalking.
Yeah.
That's what I was just about to say.
That's a bit much, guys. Like, back it up, right? Also,
consider awards like that may be regional awards, like Martin has, Richmond has the Cannonball Awards. So, maybe enter regional awards, maybe enter state awards, maybe enter, the awards that the art directors and the art producers are going to see. So if you do one that's for, let's say, a publication that only goes to photographers and they have an awards thing, the photographer, your buying audience is not going to see it. So the archive, the CA, the One Show.
You've mentioned the One Show before. Can I just quickly say that the One Show in the UK is a like a cozy chat show on our national broadcaster. So we're not suggesting on this podcast you send your images into them.
No, definitely not. But the One Show in the United States is highly, it's just one of the best shows you can get into besides getting a Cannes Lion.
But at the same time, there's the aspect of exposure. The hard part is never knowing if you win an award, even if it's something that maybe not be as prestigious as the One Show or the Effies or whatever it might be, you don't know, right? So it's like if you don't buy a ticket, you're not winning the lottery. It's unless you enter, you don't know. It's also great. You can, regardless, if you can do an email and it says a first grand prize winner of American photography or whatever, still, again, it might be a reason for someone to open up that email and look at your work.
Yeah, that's. I'll be blunt. That's the only reason I really enter awards. Really win awards. It's the only reason I enter is just it gives me collateral to just knock on the door with.
Exactly, and that has high value, frankly.
I mean, Kat, you remember every year when the CA awards came out for either photographer or for the advertising, how many the photographers the art directors would come to our desk and go, I want to see this portfolio. I mean, they would have those, the pages dog-eared and everything.
Yeah. Again, because a crowd creates a crowd. It's like somebody who won an award. Maybe I'll win an award, because there are some creatives who are motivated by that above all.
But Kat, that brings up a very good point about being a photographer and working with a art director and an ad agency on pro bono, because think about the Holocaust Museum ads that I think it was, did Jay Anta do the Holocaust Museum ads, or was it
I don't remember.
But it won all these awards, and so I remember the art director who won it, he moved on to a larger agency, because that's how they move up, is they win awards. So they need really great photography for their pro bono work, because the pro bono work comes from them, and it doesn't have a lot of stipulations attached to the brand.
I guess my worry on the flip side of that, of doing pro bono work, is that you don't want to introduce yourself. I know no names here, obviously, but I have a friend of mine who was just raving to me last week about doing a job, and I said, "Oh yeah, that's great." He goes, "Oh, I'm not being paid for it," and I was like, "But that's for a multinational brand. Why are you?" That doesn't make any sense to me. Why are you doing pro bono? He goes, "Oh, I'm trying to introduce myself to the agency." I said, what you've done there is shown how inexperienced you are, they're not going to take you with them. They're just going to be like, oh, this guy's doing us a solid for free, we'll not bother using him again. Because if there's a job where they're going to pay someone for it, they're not going to be like, oh, remember that guy we didn't pay for that job.
Unless the experience was really good and the end product was really good, then it's worth it, because they will come back from you doing them a favor.
Sure, but
yeah. You're right, Tom. There is no obligation for that buyer to be using a photographer who's doing a favor for you. There is, and if there is quid pro quo, that actually is unethical from the agency perspective, right? So there are that there's no guarantee that you'll have that back. However, again, similar to low budget projects, that can pay off in other work from other people by having that work in your portfolio, especially if you realize that, oh, wait a minute, I do have a gap in my portfolio. I am only shooting this particular type of image. I need to broaden that. Why not do it where you can at least develop a relationship with someone and is keeping you working? So there is benefit to that too. But you're right, you have to kind of weigh that. And you'll know the ones who will often have reputations as not of taking advantage of people, right?
Yep. My example of the pro bono was when art directors get tired of working, the clients dictating what they have to do and really micromanaging it, they will go out and find an organization like the one that I was talking about earlier. And, it's usually like it's a nonprofit that they'll do pro bono work. So it's not even on the agency's roster. It's actually something that the art director and a copywriter have gone out and are doing work so that they can have more creative freedom on it. And that's why they do it, because they know it's going to most likely win awards. So, but for someone to do pro bono on a multi-international client, it is kind of questionable, but it would let the art director and the agency see how the photographer works on a cooperative, collaboration on set.
Sure.
I think it's difficult right now because with social media, everyone wants to be a social media star. Everyone wants to have their work seen. They want that. They want to be recognized.
I don't want to be a social media star.
But there are many who do, and there are photographers who are not real photographers out there. They have images that people want to purchase or they want to use. They're ready to give them away because they get the credibility for it, and that damages the industry, frankly. But it's hard when their motivation is not money; it is recognition.
So I guess that brings us on then to kind of how you've seen the industry change. And specifically, I guess we're interested in things like social media and what that means, and the fact that more so perhaps in the UK than in the US, but the role of the art buyer is perhaps being altered at some agencies over here. And I think that's partly because the agencies are having to adapt and change with the way that things are going. Have you seen anything similar in the US, or have you got any thoughts on kind of social? Because again, social is one of those things which it's taken a while for clients to actually say, you know what, we have got a budget for social, and so they should, because when you look at how many views they're getting and how widely the images might be seen, that has huge amounts of value for that company. But yet for a long time it was difficult for them to necessarily quantify that.
What I've seen a lot is that the ability to shoot stills in motion has become more important. I'm not saying that every photographer should shoot motion. I'm just saying that again adds to your bag of tricks. And there are some cases, especially with social media, where you're doing animated GIFs and you're shooting some motion, but it's again for social media where it's not full video, and yet there is still a lot of video as well. So having that might be something to consider if you have a good director eye to be able to shoot motion as well. But it's the same thing as it was with retouching before. Remember when Photoshop came out, every photographer is also a retoucher? Well, not so much, right? Those skills aren't necessarily one and the same. So you have to think about what makes sense for you, but it's something to consider. I think also with the pandemic, it's opened up other opportunities. For example, being remote. I can tell you from working on the agency side, there were many positions that went remote that previously were never considered to be remote.
Mm-hmm.
But I think what we've learned from that is anything is possible with the right technology, with the right thought behind it, and a little bit of planning. There are many shoots that take place right now where the agency client isn't there, the art director isn't there, it's all done virtually via Zoom. And you know what, it works. Unfortunately, right now, the cost of COVID compliance is offsetting the lack of travel. But when the COVID compliance goes down and it doesn't add the tens of thousands of dollars to a shoot, then the not traveling will actually save the client money. And so that might continue.
Do you think it will continue in the sense that photographers not necessarily traveling for work as much as well? Or do you think that's... because obviously at the moment, there's travel bans. So there are other, shoots that are happening. They're having to get creative and find other ways to do it and source more talent locally, which I don't personally think is a bad thing at all. But it is maybe kind of means that there's less options if you're not based in a big city or you're...
All of that is possible. All of that has happened. Again, are you shooting more locally because you're not traveling? Are you, again, doing everything remote with someone who's in a location where the subject matter is or where the client is based? All of those things happen.
Do you think remote shooting is in kind of over Zoom or whatever, FaceTime, do you think that's going to stay after the pandemic, or do you think this is a kind of bit of a fad?
I think it definitely will stay. I know that there are differences in Europe and the US about clients attending shoots and things, and in Europe it's not as common for the client to be on every shoot. I don't know if it's still that way now. In the US, the client almost always attends. I have a feeling that may change now, because they're realizing they might not need to be on set the whole time. And that, again, saves money. And you also might not need to send the copywriter and the art director and the art producer on a shoot. Maybe there are different ways of doing that. So you have only one agency representative there. And the rest are virtual.
But sometimes the perk of the job is the kind of getting the day out on shoots, and for the clients... depending, some clients really enjoy the kind of being involved and being on set. So
I also think there's a hugely important bit of the client being on set. Yes, they might kind of have suggestions that maybe haven't kind of been discussed in advance or things like that, but them seeing how their money's being spent, for me, is actually quite an important part of the process. I want them to see that they're getting their money's worth.
And I think you can still see that virtually.
Yeah.
Right?
And I think that's what they're finding out. Yeah, that they're watching it in real time. So if they want to make a change, they can make a change in real time.
But I have incense burning on my shoots, for example. They're not getting the full, effect. I'm burning frankincense and myrrh, all sorts of stuff going on.
Maybe not. And again, it's probably going to be a matter of degrees, right? There might be something that's very critical for them to be able to respond and be in the moment and focused on that. But again, from a client perspective, are they paying for 5 people to attend a shoot on the agency side, and when it's been proven they really need no one there? So I think clients may drive that versus the desire.
Yeah. Well, money drives everything, right?
It does. But like I say, right now, the cost of COVID precautions are exceeding the savings for travel right now.
Yeah. Do you think then that generally will mean that next year's budgets are healthier because they've budgeted for the COVID, and then who knows?
Who knows?
And in terms of kind of roles within agencies, have you seen much change of that in the US, or as in terms of new roles emerging, or there's quite often there's names that might pop up of like somebody saying, "Oh, I'm this is my title."
Yes, I've seen that at Martin. They have a whole division on just being woke, being knowing what is current and making sure pronouns and all that, and have a incredibly making sure not just that the work is diverse, but making sure that the agency atmosphere, it has a diversity, and there's just being careful about everything. So I've seen that at Martin. I've also seen a lot of agencies, I think it was McKinney down in Raleigh, that they are making a huge effort to make sure that they have a lot more ethnic and more ethnicity in their work, and they're really, and also hiring people from different ethnic backgrounds. So they're really trying to really diversify the whole process.
That is
taking a proactive step to do that.
That is true. Many agencies are hiring their first director of inclusion or director of diversity in the wake of George Floyd, and so I think that is going to continue. I hope it's not just a phase. I hope it's not a separate thing. It really, until diversity, equity, inclusion can be more systemic, it should just be pervasive rather than a thing, and I hope that continues. So definitely that's in there. The other position I've seen is a COVID compliance officer, right? You have someone who has the whole safety thing in mind, whether it's on the production side or agency side.
Yeah, I've had that on set recently, actually. It's been quite interesting to kind of see the various backgrounds of the people that now do that.
A variety.
Yeah. To go back to the social media side of things, what have you seen in the last kind of, I guess 10 to 15 years? I'm trying to think when kind of Facebook had merged. That was kind of the early 2000s, wasn't it? So, yeah, about 15 years. Companies, what have you seen in terms of the way that companies change their approach to that and budget for that, and the way that how seriously they take it, and whether or not it's now bigger for them than, say, billboards or more traditional avenues?
Well, Kat, do you remember when you and I were talking about the trends? Ad Age did a whole thing on where media dollars had been in 2020, where media dollars are going to be in 2021, where media dollars were going to be in 2022.
Right.
And it was, what was it called? Pay to play. Remember?
Yep.
And that was, and there's agencies that's all they do is do this pay to play advertising. And in the chart, I'll make sure I send it to you so you can send it to everyone else. But it's just really fascinating to see how much difference all the other mediums were compared to this pay to play. No, it's called Pure Play. It's called Pure Play Internet.
Okay.
And so what's that translator? Sorry, I'm being the voice of the listener. Not just myself.
Kat was the best. I asked her because I was kind of like, what is that transpire? Because they're saying that 59% of the media dollars from 2012 to 2024, 59% of the media dollars will go to this pure play internet.
And I think that's the thing is right now, for example, there's so much even variety within social media, right? Even within channels, whether you're doing an Instagram, are you doing a paid promotion, or are you doing an organic on your own owned channels? Are you doing over the top media for video, or are you doing cable, right? There are lots of different buzzwords of things, but basically what it comes down to is this: the number of channels and diversity within channels is expanding exponentially. What we have today will keep expanding exponentially. There's going to be another thing, because back when it was only Facebook, now you're talking Instagram, you're talking TikTok, you're talking, it's like a multitude of different things that advertisers are now using. And, the idea is to be connected to it so you understand, but don't be like the 5-year-old playing soccer where you're chasing the ball. Think about it again more strategically, what is appropriate for you, whether you're advertising in those or promoting your work in those channels, or the type of work you're creating for those channels.
I guess one of my questions really is kind of, has usage for social changed in terms of the money involved and budgeted aside for that, for paying for usage in social? Because initially it might have been regarded as a small area that they needed to, create stuff for, but they weren't necessarily sure on what they were getting back from it. I mean, there are companies now whose 99% of their, if not 100% of their presence is online and through social channels. And that's where people are seeing the brand.
Right, and that's what I was telling you with the pure play internet. It's showing you that the advertisers are spending the most money so they would have to, if they're going to spend the most money in those mediums, they definitely want their message to be professional, so they're going to have the agencies do great work, hire great photographers to get the message out.
The hardest part with that is, for example, posting something on social is a fraction of the cost of putting a TV ad out. Right?
Sure. Yeah.
And doing a spot buy and trying to make sure that of the 10 million possible channels out there that you're doing a buy in the right spot, your money goes a lot further with social. The hardest part of that is it's hard to actually analyze your return on investment, right? Because you're not...
But you would have thought it's not now, because surely with analytics and data available, it would be so easy to see how much engagement that you've directly had from people.
But does engagement convert to sales? That's the question.
Yep.
Yeah.
Because when somebody's looking at it and when they're liking it, but is it converting to sales? That's the hard part.
What I'm saying is it must be easier to analyze that than, say, this billboard on 6th Avenue. How do you measure the kind of the analytics of something like that versus digital? I would have thought, I don't know, I think moving forward, I guess what's interesting is that the data is so powerful, and you do wonder if at some point, with blockchain technology and things like that, what they will mean for moving forward. I mean, I know that there's been a lot going on recently with blockchain technology and data, and the first tweet went up for sale and all that kind of stuff, those NFTs. I mean, the majority of that is a little above my head, but it's definitely something that is a technology that's kind of emerging and will develop and will morph and will have an impact on the industry.
It will. It'll be curious. Anybody want to buy a $26 million piece of art through NFT?
Oh, yeah. It's digital art.
Right. And again, what will happen, more technologies will continue to emerge, and also not only just platforms, but the data analysis that goes with that.
Mm-hmm.
I think one thing that's quite interesting for photographers, and we touched on this in a recent episode, when we were talking about social video and stills for kind of social, is now that you're not just having to provide imagery that's going to be sat on a page or sat on a billboard, but you're also having to crop it to fit on an iPhone, and then you're having to fit all these different formats.
Mm-hmm.
So actually there's a lot more deliverables that are having to come out the same situation, which actually makes it a lot trickier from a creative point of view, especially with a still image, because the still image is so much around composition and obviously the message and the tone and everything, but the composition is quite important. And for you then to have to crop to all these different formats with the same advert, it's kind of interesting as to whether or not, I've been on set where they've just said, just shoot wide because we need to be able to crop this and crop that. And you're like, well, if I shoot so wide, like it's starting to really, I don't know.
My default is always shoot square, shoot one to
square.
one. Because, and here's why, because you can crop in any direction in a square, but the thing is what it means is you still need to be able to accommodate the vertical and horizontal formats within that square, right? So that means your ceiling height might have to be higher if you're doing an interior, right? Because you need to be able to accommodate that. But shooting square is safest, not the be-all, end-all.
So if that's the takeaway from this, the mantra of shoot square. I mean, that's fascinating. Tom, do you have anything to add on the...
It just kills me that we spend all this time creating, the images how we feel they should be framed, and then I've had it in the past where I have been I've been asked to shoot, obviously I'm a portrait guy, so I tend to shoot kind of on 50 mil and longer. And I was told that I needed to shoot an entire job on 20 mil. And it was, and then we had to tape up the back of the screen, and we had to stick the subject smack in the center of the thing. And it was, they weren't very good photographs because, I'm stood about 20 feet back shooting on the widest possible lens I've ever shot on. And they're going, these are great. They're going to work across every platform. I'm going, but they're not good photographs. They might tick every box, but it's so wide, I can barely see the subject. It's because they know they're going to be punching in and doing this and doing that. And they were very happy, but for me, I kind of just left the set feeling a bit hollow.
So what I've always done in that instance is I make people shoot plates, right? Shoot me a background plate.
Sure.
So that gives me the flexibility I need where the artist can still shoot what they desire, but at least I'll always have a plate if I have to.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
See,
I wanted
that's
to have
a much
t-shirt.
nicer way of... Yeah, that's it. It's a much
plate,
nicer
please.
way to... That's a much nicer way of doing
square
it.
on the back.
Yep, exactly.
To be honest, you guys have just absolutely knocked all the questions out of the park.
Yeah, you've boshed through them.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Incredibly efficient. I'll tell you that.
Well, the good thing is we have show notes that we always put up, so we will link to the various things that you've mentioned, because there's been a lot of names that I'm going to be furiously Googling for the next week, trying to find out all these things you've been talking about, because a lot of them, obviously, we have listeners in the States, but we also have quite a lot of listeners in the UK and Europe, and they are different markets. Whatever anyone says, the way that the US is such a big market, that sometimes it can seem like a bit of an alien world. But we will put up the show notes so that everyone can kind of get on board and realise that the one show isn't the BBC One show, things like that. And obviously, before we go, we always have our final questions, which are on Desert Island Book and Desert Island Camera. So have you guys got any thoughts on that? Did you have time to prepare something?
I know what my camera will be, and I have a handmade pinhole camera that was made by Andrew Kamen Lindgaard. It is an absolutely gorgeous work of art, and it shoots Polaroid, and it's just, that would be my go-to, because it's just a precious little piece of equipment.
Wow.
For photo book, oh my gosh, I couldn't choose. I have so many, and thankfully I collect the photo books that I've been given for promotions over the years, and they're all, I want to.
Is there one that kind of sparked a love of photography, or is there one that really kind of, if you think about it now, you just think, I remember that photo book? I mean, I know you've seen so many, but I'm not going to let you get away with saying I can't pick one.
So there's a photographer, he's a local photographer named Mark Norberg. He shot, and this is again decades ago, incredible black and white photos of jazz musicians, and it's definitely one of my favorites still. It's gorgeous.
Perfect.
Brilliant.
Well, if we're able to find it online, we'll link to it, or if his work is online, we'll try and link to that so the listeners can have a look.
There we go. And
what about...
I do want to mention the name of the Bubble Boy photographer in case people can look it up.
Oh, yes.
His name is George Camper, Kamper. Okay. So definitely look it up. And
I actually looked it up, and there's one of him sat in one of those little red carts being dragged around.
Oh my gosh, aren't they? They're
great.
They're just
they're great.
really clever.
They're really good fun.
Yep.
Really good fun. I can imagine that going down really well. People go, do you know what? I had enough of all these projects. People stood on their doorways. This is something different, and it's fun.
Yes, exactly.
Nice to look at.
And Suzanne, what are your choices?
I'm probably for a camera, because I'm not a photographer. I just know what is the market wants. And I don't really take a lot of photos, except of my kids. And as far as photo books, I just I have so many. I mean, from there's one guy, and I'm going to get his name wrong, and I would like to check, and I think I think he's someone who just recently passed, and it was an unfortunate passing. And the book was called The New Yorkers, and it's just great photography from the 70s and the 60s and the 70s, and a little bit of the 80s, of just life in New York before it became so generic looking. New York has lost its flavor. Then another book just popped in my head when I was saying that. Diane Arbus. Yeah, that's.
Yes.
In fact, I have on my wall. I have 2 pieces by Amy Arbus, Diane's daughter,
Oh,
and
cool.
so
wow.
I treasure those because they're signed by her. I think so many different photographers are so amazing, and I probably would have like a big steamer trunk full of books because I just have to take them all, So I just, I think most of the ones I love most are in black and white.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's where my love definitely comes from. But yeah, just like beautiful, beautiful work. There's, even personal work. I'm going to get hold on.
Yeah, there is so much.
Yeah, Max Hirschfeld did an amazing
Max.
book about taking his mother back to
yes.
the concentration camp
Oh,
that
my goodness.
she was sent there, and it is just it's such a heartfelt book, and it's just beautiful. And I have that downstairs, and that's a recent book, and it's just so some of mine are like just beautiful personal projects that people have done to. Just I like history, and so I like to see, going back, in my lifetime, looking at how life has changed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, that's the most powerful thing. Well, one of the most powerful things of photography is a testament of time that it stands up to. It becomes a historical document, and sometimes pictures only become more and more powerful as time passes.
But it also shows why photography is so important.
Mm.
It is such an important medium that should never go away because it takes that one moment in time and it freezes it forever. And that's like, Cartier-Bresson. That's another one of my favorite books downstairs.
Yeah.
So I just have so many, but I think it's really about just what the essence of photography is and how it is so important.
The passion projects.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, in advertising, think about it. It's the photography that gets you to stop to read the copy.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, very much so.
And that's why it's so important.
Yeah. So if people want to find out more about, because I know that you work as a mentor, Suzanne, if people want to find out more, where can they go to see that or to...
Well, they can go to my website, which is Suzanne, Suzanne, Sease, SEASE.com. And I also have a weekly blog post on A Photo Editor every Thursday on the art of the personal project.
Brilliant.
Yes, which is definitely worth checking out. It's it's a great blog anyway. It's been going for a long, long time. I believe that's how we first got in touch many years ago. And Kat, is there anything that you'd like to plug before the end?
Yeah, I'm always open if you want to contact me and drop me a line. I love meeting new people. And my email would be katdalager@gmail.com. And I would imagine you'll have the spelling of my name somewhere along the way. And
should be in the title.
Yeah, there we go.
We'll try and get it right.
Yeah, we'll pop it in the show. We'll pop it in the show notes.
Yeah, I remember all the mailers Kat would get when we were at Martin Agency together, and people would think that she was Gallagher, like the guy who throws the watermelons.
I've gotten
and
it
it's
all.
just like, no, she's Dalager. Sease, they don't get that right either. So.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, guys, for coming on. It's been a fascinating chat, and I wish we had longer to actually go deeper and further. But maybe at some point in the future we'll get you back on.
Sounds great.
But thank you so much.
We could do part 2 after COVID.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
Life after COVID.
Yep. We'll see if predictions came true.
Exactly.
You could be our American correspondents if you like.
Oh,
there we go.
Awesome.
Amazing.
I'm going to be sending you a bunch of links and stuff and information. So look in your emails for that.
Brilliant.
And we will pop that up on the show notes so everyone listening will be able to access that on the Exposed Negative website.
Excellent.
Wonderful.
Fantastic.
Okay.
Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for listening to the latest episode. If you'd like to find out more or to see the show notes, please go over to exposednegative.com, or you can follow us on Instagram at xnegative. It's very imaginative. And if you want to email us, you can email us at info@exposednegative.com. I know, how did we come up with that? So hope you enjoy the podcast. Any suggestions, feedback, or general harassment, please send it in. And yeah, we'll catch you on the next one.